so that they've got a way to connect up as well as refer to this as they're writing their personal statement. And then we'll have other components for the portfolio in about 3-4 weeks is when we'll start talking about the reflection papers. Our first presentation in here is next Thursday on the 12th. And then next Tuesday, we are planning on doing a peer review day for personal statements. So if you've already been writing up a personal statement, or you need to have a personal statement and you want your peers to take a look at it, that's a good day for that to happen. And hopefully, unlike the last peer review day, we won't have an ice storm that prevents it from happening in person. So bring copies next week, either if you can bring out printed copies, that's fine. If you cannot, if you just want to have it electronic. So like I said, on Tuesday, you've got the goal of bringing 2 copies. If you're doing printout copies, do that. If not, just have some way to share to other people. But have something that you can show off. I probably won't be able to read everyone's, but I can kind of give you some brief comments if you bring a copy for me to look at. And this will be due next Thursday as the first, I guess, official or second official thing in your portfolio, just like the CVs and resumes were due today. This will be due next Thursday. I don't need you to turn in a rough draft or anything like that. The whole point of that is Tuesday to bring in your rough draft and bring in what you want for peer review. And then next Thursday, we have our first group presentation. So we are quickly kind of going to take a break for a few weeks from the portfolio. And the next thing you're writing for the portfolio will be a reflection paper, and we'll talk more about that in 3 or 4 weeks. Questions?
Do you know the meeting that we have to have with you, is it still due tomorrow?
No, so since we had all the ice day and everything, if you haven't had that individual one-on-one with me to talk about career plans and talk about your 75 minutes and all of that, just make a meeting with me in the next couple of weeks and we'll get that in. Yeah. So this is an example from a graduate program. This is actually from the University of Toledo, where I went to grad school. This is for their clinical psychology program, and this was the statement that they had at least 3 years ago. And it looks pretty much exactly like the one that I had to write similar to 20 years ago. So, but we'll actually get into that in a moment. So I don't think they've changed it much. For the clinical psych program, they want a statement of purpose of no more than 2 single-spaced pages. The applicant's name should be indicated on top of each page. After you create your document, convert it to an Adobe PDF file. And the statement of purpose should address the following areas. You can tell this is old because it was written before Word could actually save to PDF, so they're telling you how to convert to PDF. Nobody updates these things. They want why you want to be a clinical psychologist, your professional plans or goals as a clinical psychologist, as specifically as possible. Of course, they only want 2 pages, so as specifically as possible in 2 pages. Indicate what you see yourself doing in 5 or 10 years from now. That's always a fun one. See the future. Tell us about it. Your background or experience relevant to clinical psych training, your interests in the field of psychology. Please describe any specific interests in clinical psychology. If possible, please indicate 1 or more faculty members whom you would like to work with and how they may assist you in developing your area of interest further. That 1 or more particular faculty members is not a suggestion that you should take lightly, because what they're telling you is, when we are reading these statements that people are making, we are picking who we want to have as the next student in our lab. And so if you call us out, if you name drop us, we will resonate with that. If you just say, I'll work with anyone there, no one is going to say that you sound like a good fit for them because you just said you'll work with anyone. So there's a little bit of inside knowledge here. And that's also important. The difference between undergraduate and graduate admissions. Undergraduate admissions at pretty much every college or university are done through an admissions office that you send in your materials, and an admissions officer, depending on the criteria for that institution, decides if you get an offer of admission or not. Sometimes institutions that have fairly open standards, this is a quick decision. You have all the required elements, they let you in. If it's a very highly selective institution, they might want to do interviews, they might have a bunch of different things they're looking at, but it's an admissions officer that day in and day out, their job is to admit students or not admit students. Graduate programs typically rely on the faculty in that program to make that decision. So the admissions office will collect all of the materials. They will then send it to a graduate faculty advisor or graduate faculty member or the program coordinator, and they will say, what do you want us to tell this person? Do you want us to tell them that they're admitted? Do you want us to tell them that they're not admitted? You tell us. We are not going to tell you what to do. You are the faculty member. And that is where I think some people go wrong. They figure if I have all the essential elements, like I've had students come up to me and say, hey, I meet the admissions requirements. I have at least a 3.0 GPA and I've got this and this and this. And I tell them, yeah, those are the bare minimum requirements. Those aren't the everyone who meets this gets in. Whereas it might be for undergraduate programs. For graduate programs, that might be the floor, not the average for everyone. So it's a different world in that sense. And then optional, here's a little tip. If they say something's optional, include it, because they're telling you it's not going to kill you not to do it, but we also would love to see this. They want a statement on diversity and how, diversity, your thoughts on it, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the clinical psychology program at the University of Toledo. I did not go to the clinical program. I went to the experimental program, and this is their statement from the same department. You notice it's a little bit shorter. They still want to know your professional plans or goals. They still want to know what you're doing in 5 to 10 years. I really should dig up. I probably have my statement that I wrote back in 2003 when I applied there, and I'd be curious to see what I thought I was doing in 5 to 10 years. My background and relevance experience of the experimental program and your interests, and of course they're asking for that. Hey, if you can do it, also tell us who you want to work with. I actually know I did not do this, and I actually got a call from one of the faculty members who read my statement, and basically he ended up becoming my advisor and basically saying, hey, you sound like someone that I want to work with. So I got lucky in that someone reached out to me without me proactively saying I want to work with them. And I will tell you that for that department, that was how they made initial contact. They would get everyone's statements in, they'd read them, you'd hear nothing. You applied, I think, by February 1st, and then March 8th or somewhere around there, I got a phone call from a professor saying, hey, I want to talk to you a little bit about this. We talked for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then at the end of it, he said, hey, you want to come out and visit next week? It's spring break, so campus will be kind of empty, but why don't you come out and we'll talk and have lunch. And so I did, and that was my interview. They didn't do a formal interview day. And I got an offer a few weeks later. So sometimes grad programs have very official ways of doing things. They hold big interview days. Another program I applied to, that's what they did. They had 70 candidates out on a Saturday, and we had to go through various meetings and activities and such. But other programs are very much more, this is just how we do it, and this is how we want you to present yourself. And then another clinical psych program that I found, this was just all they wanted. Your personal statement should address the following 2 to 3 pages in length. So they don't even care if it's double spaced or single spaced. They're just saying, if you are applying to a psychology graduate program, assume they mean APA style double spaced. That's just the standard. Describe personal and professional goals during graduate school and how it will help you accomplish these. So they don't care about your 5 to 10 years. They just want to know what your next 2 years are, or 5 years for a clinical psych program. Your preference for the child or adult concentration area. So they don't care about who specifically in that ones. They just want to know what you want to do concentration-wise. And then they are also asking for specific faculty members. So you're going to probably want to know who their specific faculty members are. But the point I'm making with these 3 examples is that there's a wide array of things they could ask for, wide array of things that you might want to apply for. And if you're applying to multiple programs, you're going to have to tailor your personal statement, just like you had to tailor a CV or a resume. You might have to tailor it for the particular program that you're interested in. Any questions about any of that. Jobs may want statements of purpose, statements of intent, faith statements, cover letters. In regards to what they're looking for centrally, though, it's likely that what they're trying to do is assess fit. Are they a good fit here? Is this person going to fit in well with our culture? If they're not just looking at every resume and taking everyone in at the same time, that's what they're essentially trying to figure out is, do you fit with our culture? We are in a country where most everyone is at what's called at-will employment. So at-will means that you can be fired pretty much at any time for any reason, unless it's a protected class or protected action that you were engaged in, and you can show that you were fired for that cause. So what that means is that employers really are not interested in being objective in their hiring. They're interested in being subjective, because they're also subjective in their keeping of employees and their firing of employees. So fit is important. That's what they're trying to assess. I saw something, here's an interesting video I was watching yesterday that was randomly of stuff you never say to your employer or you never say to HR. And the things that one of them was you never tell your employer that you're overwhelmed or stressed, because they record that in your file as has concerns about conducting their work or producing their work. And so you've basically just given them a reason to fire you because you've told them flat out that you're not doing well. There's just a lot of weird things when it comes to how employers communicate with employees. I think the best advice I ever got was I took a human resource management course as an undergrad, and the professor at one point said, in an employee-employer relationship, both sides assume that they are getting more out of the relationship than they're giving. Employers think that they are getting more out of their employees than they're having to pay them or compensate them, and employees think that they are putting in the bare minimum and getting back more than they're putting in. And it's a very cynical way of thinking about that interaction. But if you assume that's what's going on, you will never get burned in a sense of thinking that the situation is different. So be cynical if you have to be cynical about jobs. All right, so let's talk about personal statements. You hear this phrase in journalism called burying the lead. Burying the lead is failing to emphasize the most important part of the story or account. So in journalism school, they basically tell you if it's something important, it needs to be above the fold. That's an old newspaper term that, if it was a front page story and you had the paper folded over, you wanted it right on the above the fold area because that's what people saw. They didn't have to open the paper to see it. And when you think about who you are and why you want to get into a graduate program or why you want to get a particular job, there should be something that stands out about what makes you the best person for that job or for that position. This is not a time to be humble. This is a time to think about what you offer and how to accent that through the entire piece, whatever it is. So where do I see people going wrong with this? I see people going wrong with this by thinking that they have to talk chronologically. So for example, you may have done independent research or you may have had a job in college that was really close to what you want to do as a career. But you didn't get that job or you didn't do that research until your junior or senior year, which is obviously when it's most likely that you're going to do it. So you start off with a whole page of your 2 pages talking about why you're interested in psychology and why psychology was so important to you as a child and growing up and blah, blah, blah. And then it's the second page before you finally show off that you did something truly extraordinary. And that's why you would be a great person to have in this particular role. Why did you make your reader suffer through the entire page about how great you were and how interested you were in your childhood and all that? Well, people think, well, that happened first. So I talked about it first. There's no reason you have to do that. No one says that you have to tell your life story in your personal statement. You'll tell elements of your life story, but you won't necessarily tell absolutely everything. In my case, when I was applying to graduate programs, I had some rather strange things I had done early on in my career where I had, done some stuff in technology and computers that most people hadn't done. I had taught classes in a continuing education division at the university that I was taking classes at. So I was a part-time faculty member at age 18, which was a strange thing that no one else had that they could talk about. It would have been weird for me to bury that so far down. That should have been something that was very clear, that I had some things that other applicants did not have. And the second element that we'll talk about is having some structure. Having some element so that what you want is a personal statement that is quick to read, because the people who are reading it do not have hours and hours. They are not professors grading your personal statement. They are people deciding if they're going to hire you or offer you admission, which means they don't have to read very closely. No one is looking over their shoulder saying, oh, you were really harsh on that person, or you should have said, you should have been nicer to them about that. They want fast. Do I like this person? Is this person going to fit in here? They don't want to be trudging through things. So before we get to talking about statements, we should talk about good essays. Good essays are something I've been trying to get students to rewrite better for the last 5-6 years. It's been one of my pet peeves. This is why in all of the syllabi that I give out now, there's a whole thing on academic essay format, which I'm basically going to give you a review of in a moment here. But in my experience, when students don't know how to write an essay, or they don't know what they're doing, they just start typing. Start stream of consciousness. Just put something on the page. And it's not a bad idea for a first draft, but that's a first draft. That should not be, when I write a first draft of something, I just got asked, I noticed an email from Bolivar Bullet asking me to contribute a column for next week because they need content. Okay. So I will go home today or tomorrow and I will start pounding out something. Whatever goes into that first draft, maybe 10% of it is going to survive into the final draft, because it's just get the ideas out there, get something out. In fact, I'll probably do some pre-writing, I'll do some outlining. I'm not going to just, pound out something and say, here it is. The problem, though, that I see is that people start with the stream of consciousness, all the ideas, and then they just keep tweaking it. They don't ever rewrite it. They don't ever structure it in a way. So here's an example of a stream of consciousness personal statement. I've always been interested in psychology because you can help people and also learn a lot about how people behave. In my classes and at home, people always tell me how helpful I am, and I think this would make me a good psychologist. In the future, I want to be able to make a difference in people's lives, like I have in the past when I helped my mother grieve over her dead dog and helped my brother when he broke up with his girlfriend. We had just learned about the Kubler-Ross stages in health psychology, and I made sure he moved through all of them properly. I think this will help me, or it will make me a fit with your clinical psychology program because I have taken a lot of clinical coursework and have a lot of passion for the topic. I mean, that covers a lot of ground. It's got some interesting things in there. It's got the dead dog. That kind of pops out of nowhere. It definitely establishes that someone has a passion for the topic. They literally said it. And it definitely shows that they know a little bit about psychology. They name drop a theory, so that's not a bad thing. They don't mention who they want to study with. They don't really go into more depth, but this probably isn't the whole statement. There's probably more to it. But this is a stream of consciousness. It's an answer that you might give if someone just asked you why you want to study psychology and you were just speaking extemporaneously off the top of your head. You might say this. The wonderful thing about the written word is that you get to revise it. You don't just have what you said and then it's out in the world. You can change it before someone else sees it. And in this case, there's definitely a lot of fine-tuning that you would want to do. Essays should be structured using a standard format. This is not anything I came up with. This is not something that is revolutionary. This is a standard called academic essay format, or essay format. You have an introduction that previews material, you have major topic sentences, you have minor supporting sentences, and you have a conclusion that sums up the material. This makes them fast to read. And if you're going to be reading a bunch of things, you want something that's fast. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the people who are going to be reading these don't have a lot of time. They want something that is quick. And if you do this, it makes your writing a lot easier. Writing isn't as hard of a process. Stream of consciousness writing is great for planning, but it is horrible in terms of actually accomplishing your goals. It feels like, writer's block is always right around the corner. So if you follow this guide that I'm about to give you, your grade will improve in all of my classes and likely all of your classes. It'll be a lot easier for you to write in general, and it'll be faster writing. And like I said, it's in my syllabi. So what are these actual steps? 1, decide on your argument. What is the central point? What are you trying to communicate? If you don't know what your argument is, there's no hope for the reader to know what your argument is. So if you just sit there and you go, I have to write a personal statement, write a personal statement is not your argument. Personal statement is not your argument. What are you trying to communicate? I'm an awesome person, you should hire me. That's a good thing to communicate. It's definitely useful if you're trying to get a job. Cognitive psychology is the most influential area of experimental psychology. If you're writing a piece on why you want to study cognitive psychology, that might be a great element to communicate. The history of ADHD is fascinating and complex. That might be a great argument if you're asked to write about an area of clinical psychology that you find that you want to work in. That first line might be for a personal statement. That second might be an essay that you're writing for a class. The third might be a presentation that you're giving to a group. This is also the first step on your 75-minute class meeting in here, thinking about what you want to communicate. What's the takeaway that I want someone to have at the end of the 2 pages, or at the end of the 75 minutes, or at the end of the email, or at the end of whatever? What should you take away from it? Figure that out first. Purpose. Start with purpose. Your next piece is picking your main points. Okay, so now you've got an argument. What are the 3 or 4 things? 3 is a good number for it. 4 is about on the high end. Don't go to 5 or 6. If you have 5 or 6 things you're trying to communicate for one argument, you're going to have to be nesting things at some point, because the human brain does not like more than 3 or 4 main points. So you can nest things inside. You could have 4 main points and then, sub points under those. But you should have a structure in your mind of what your points are. So maybe if your argument is, I'm an awesome person, you should hire me, the 3 points that you want to point out is that you're smart, you're trustworthy, and you're hardworking. When I write recommendation letters for students, I think about what are the 3 things I want to highlight about this student. Sometimes the student tells me, this is the things I need you to highlight for me because this program particularly wants this. That's good. Then that helps us be in agreement on those things. Other times, I have to figure this out. And what I hate to say is sometimes students ask me to write letters of recommendation and I can't come up with 3 or 4 points because I haven't worked with them that much. So there are 2 kinds of letters of recommendation that professors write to each other. And we all know these letters of recommendation types because, first of all, you never write a letter bashing someone. I've seen that happen one time in my career. It was epic. I was on a grant panel and we were looking over applications for grants, and someone on the panel said, hey, did anyone read the recommendation letter for Joe Smith? And everyone on the panel said, no, Joe Smith never made it into our top 10 or our top 15. Why were we? No, we didn't even get past their cover letter. And the person said, you should really go read it. And so everyone pulled up Joe Smith and we were all reading it. And it was literally Joe Smith had been told by all of his professors at his university not to apply for this grant because he was not ready for it. He did not know what he was doing. He wouldn't be able to get it. He wasn't competitive for it. It was a waste of his time to put it in. And these professors were annoyed so much that Joe Smith wouldn't listen to them that when he asked them for letters of recommendation, they threw him under the bus. They didn't just throw him under the bus, they might as well have driven the bus over him. It was really quite amazing to see people just say, he doesn't listen, he didn't do this or that. It was like their gripe session, and an NSF grant panel got to read it. That's only happened one time in 20 years that I've seen that. But what often happens with letters of recommendation are that students ask me for a letter, and if it's a student that I know well, that I have worked with, that, they've been in my classes, maybe they've done independent research with me, they've been my advisee, they've asked for guidance, they contributed well in class, a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, I can come up with 3-4 things real quick. I can write them out and I can write a good letter. And my letter takes the form of, I am very pleased today to recommend so-and-so for this position. I have 3 things I want to really talk about with them, X, Y, and Z. And then I talk about X, and I talk about Y, and I talk about Z, and then I write a conclusion. It's an essay. Nice letter right there. Then I have people that ask me, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And they're an okay student. They're not a bad student. They might have very good grades, but I've never really worked with them that much. They've been in my class. They got the grade. And unfortunately, the letter I write then reads, I am writing today to recommend so-and-so for your program. They were a student in several of my classes. They performed up to the level of their grade. They contributed in class. They make a fine student in your program. It's not a bad letter, but it's not a very good letter because I didn't have a lot to say in it. So when you're thinking about what your main points are, you have to have main points. If all you can come up with is one thing, I'm an awesome person, you should hire me, and all you can say is, I'm a person with a degree, that's not a good point. Pick a different point, or pick a different topic, or pick some other way to frame your topic. If you can't come up with 3 or 4 main points, you shouldn't be writing that paper. You don't have anything else to say. Or if worse yet, you find that all 3 of your points are really the same point, you're just repeating it over and over again, come up with something different. Cognitive psychology is the most influential area of experimental psychology. 3 points there. So it has roots back to the behavioral revolution, its applications in other areas of psychology, it has applications outside of psychology. The history of ADHD is fascinating and complex. It's been noted throughout history, it has multiple presentations, and has been the study of a lot of inquiry as of late. So there's topical things going on right now with it. So again, if you can't come up with 3 or 4 main points, you should pick different things to talk about. And don't just repeat the same thing 3 times. So already, if you're following along, the stream of consciousness we've ditched long ago, because the stream of consciousness starts at step 3, and I'm telling you, do steps 1 and 2 first. Come up with an idea. This is why professors require outlines, why we don't just let you start a rough draft immediately. So like I said, the stream of consciousness starts with step 3. Write your rough draft. If you do steps 1 and 2, this is actually going to be pretty easy, comparatively, because you know what you want to say. You know what the point is. You know what the main points for each of the body paragraphs are going to be. And all you got to do is write an introductory paragraph that previews your main points. In this essay, I will discuss X, Y, and Z. You have a main paragraph, 1 for each of your main points, and a conclusion paragraph that reviews main points. That is 2 pages, double-spaced, no problems at all. And it doesn't feel so much like trying to figure out what to write, it's just filling in the blanks. This is how I have written every work I have had to write in the last 10 years, 20 years. Books. When I write books, I literally come up with a table of contents and what am I going to talk about? And then in each chapter, I have an outline, and then writing the book is real easy because it becomes, okay, I need to get from here to here today. I know that I need to fill in this section, or I need to talk about this, or I need to go through this. And it's manageable. You can write whole long works in this way. Now, don't just stop after step 3, because step 4 is important. Add transitions. This is probably the step I see people neglect the most. They do steps 1, 2, and 3, and then they leave off step 4, and it's like leaving the icing off of the cake or leaving the finishing touches. So the beginning and the end of every paragraph, make sure you have a sentence that transitions you to your next thought. Because you have 3 thoughts, 3 main points, you need to transition from one to the other. Treat section headings, if you use them, as if the reader doesn't read them, because lately what I've noticed has been really bad in student writing that I've seen is section headings all over the place. I have graduate students that turn in 2-page papers to me, and they have a section heading before every paragraph. It makes no sense. This is 2 pages. There should be no section headings. It's not long enough to need section headings. But the way that they're thinking is going back to that rough draft, they had 3 main points. They want to have a section heading for each main point. You don't need that, especially if the section's only 1 paragraph. So they're using section headings as a crutch instead of transitions. Write transitions. Transitions are simply saying, not only am I intelligent, I'm also hardworking. Now that I've told you about my background and my work ethic, I'd like to talk about honesty. Those are transitions that easily tell the reader what you're doing and where you're going. So I always say, if you're going to use section headings, just assume the reader isn't reading them, because I know half the time I don't know what the section heading was, because I just jumped from the end of one paragraph to the next paragraph.
Sentence, so I didn't even do anything with that. I was just like, this is what
Yeah.
I want that beginning sentence to be, and then I tried to like make it smoothly transition into the second one, but with that I was just like, I don't want to like repeat what they tell us to write.
And in a sense, I suspect that the person who came up, I don't know whoever came up with that method that your program is interested in. I should really talk to them about it. I'd probably find them. But I suspect they had a lot of problems with students not picking central points that they cared about, and also they wanted to make sure that the essay read properly. It didn't just abruptly start, stop, this and that. So if we tell them basically the first sentence has to start with this, that's a very heavy-handed way of forcing a transition. So just because you have, here's a look behind the curtain, just because you have a PhD or an EDD doesn't mean you know how to write. And so sometimes I've seen colleagues of mine that harp about student writing and their writing is horrible because they're used to writing in a certain way. They don't ever get to the point. They don't have conciseness in their writing. So yeah, it can be a challenge. All right, so here is that personal statement that we looked at with the dead dog in academic essay format. I am a motivated student who seeks to combine my passion for psychology with the courses I've already taken in order to maximize my time in your graduate program, which I believe is a good fit for the reasons I'll discuss below. That is a very long sentence, but it does the job of introducing the whole thing. You already know from that very first sentence what they're going to do. That's the whole point of an introduction. For as long as I can recall, I've always enjoyed helping people understand and help themselves. I was the one who sat with my mother as she grieved the loss of her beloved pet, helping her remember the good times, cherishing the impact her dog had made on her life. I was also the one who texted my brother daily after his girlfriend ended their relationship as he went through a dark time wondering how to move on. I wouldn't have been able to do those things without the knowledge I learned taking psychology courses. You can see the structure there. You can see major and minor support there. You also see that this person has realized that they shouldn't come off as the end-all be-all of things. So they're not talking about enforcing a Kubler-Ross stages of grief model, which is a bad idea because we know that that's not a theory that was ever how people should behave. It was just a descriptive theory that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote up after observing. So, there's certain things that you communicate in a poor way, thinking you're sounding smart because, you read the Cliff Notes version of your textbook and not the actual textbook. I've taken several different psychology courses across different areas of the field, including health psychology, abnormal psychology, and research methods. In health psychology, we learned about the lack of evidence behind the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, which helped me understand that not everyone will grieve in the same ways. This also echoed what I learned in abnormal psychology, ... So you can imagine how the rest of this is structured because it's all structured in the same way. Then a paragraph on future directions and fit, and then a conclusion that echoes the 3 parts above. This has the same information that the first one had, but it's organized. And if I am a graduate coordinator or a graduate professor and I'm trying to advocate for why we should accept this person into the program, and that does happen in some cases where the faculty gather around and they all talk about, who do we admit, who do we not? If I'm looking for evidence, if I say, well, Jane Doe was really good in blah, 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 and I pull up their personal statement, I might have 3 seconds to find exactly the point I want to make. I can find it in this. If it's buried somewhere at the beginning, middle, end, somewhere they mention this, I can't bring it up in the meeting because it's going to take me too long to find it in the meeting. And by the time I find it, my colleagues have already stopped talking about Jane Doe. They're going to talk about someone else now. So structure helps. Having a purpose helps. Knowing the points you want to make helps. And ultimately, it will make you a faster writer. I think people avoid it because they think that all that time they spent on coming up with the idea and the main points, they think that's wasted time because they're not actually writing. But what you learn is that it takes you 10 minutes to do it one way, and it takes you 20 minutes to do it the stream of consciousness way. You are saving time. It just doesn't seem like it because you don't realize the planning is taking up less time than the writing would. There are a lot of good examples of writing an effective statement. So I put this blog post that I'll kind of walk through a little bit, but it all boils down to some common elements. Not too long, not too short, 2 pages, double-spaced if no guidance is given. Don't go on for pages and pages. If you have a personal statement that's 6 pages long, no one is going to read it. They just aren't. They don't have the time for it, and they don't have to. Readability. Use a tool like Grammarly or Hemingway app, or Word has an editor tool now that will tell you about what your writing style is. Shoot for a grade 6 to 8 range. Not too fancy, not too simple. Should they be able to read something that's in a, postgraduate style? Yes, they should, but it's going to take them longer, and it's going to be more time on their end. So write it simple. And remember, APA style values concise and direct communication. So never feel bad about short, purposeful sentences. That's the point of it. Don't focus all on one aspect. This is one that I saw really prevalent in the past, where in 2 pages, someone would spend a page and a half on their background because they really want to talk about their passion for psychology. Okay, that's great, but then you've only given yourself a half a page for what you're doing now, what you've learned, and what you want to do in the future. You didn't give yourself a lot of time. You didn't balance that out. If anything, in 2 pages, if you want to cover all 3 of those things, your background should take a half a page. It shouldn't go longer than that, because there's a lot in what you've done now and what you've learned, and there's a lot in what you want to do in the future. Personal statements are trying to look forward. They're not trying to be reflective on who you are and all of that. They're trying to talk about where you're at now and where you want to go. And APA style, unless otherwise specified. And then we can spend a little bit of time on some do's and don'ts, and then have some time for some questions. So, do treat your personal statement as if it's an admission interview. It might be the only admission interview you get. They might not do an interview day at all. So this is your chance to make a case for yourself. follow directions. You know, especially by certain schools, they have very specific things they want. Not only does it tell them that you care if you follow those directions, it also shows that you actually know that they wanted you to do certain things. If you just give them all the same statement, then all you're really doing is showing that you're applying to a lot of different places and you're hoping that one of them will take you. So if they want specific things, make sure you give them those specific things. Don't just submit a narrative of your resume. I've seen a lot of people, this is something that you see more in business, but instead of writing about who they are and why they're a great fit for that job, they just repeat the same things that have been on their resume. I started off at this company where I did this. Then I moved here and I did that. And then I came here and I did this particular thing. Okay, I learned all of that from the 5 seconds I spent on your resume. I don't need you to also take up 20 seconds telling me the same things. Don't even think about submitting your personal statement without having it reviewed by someone else. So that's why we're doing a peer review day on Tuesday. You want other people to have read it. You want other people to have helped proofread it. You do not want to just sit down 5 minutes before it's due, pound it out, submit it, and pray. That is setting yourself up for, well, the other phrase that will serve you well in your career is hope is not a strategy. So if your whole plan was just hoping for the best, that's not a good strategy for success. Some other do's and don'ts. Do make your personal statement responsive. Individual schools will ask for specific things. Make sure you respond to those specific things. Different jobs will ask for specific things. So again, it can't be the same statement that you use for everyone. It has to have some tailored elements to it. Do write about yourself. We all have stories. We all have different things we want to talk about. Your personal statement is personal. It is something that has to be about you, and it's one of the very few times you can talk about yourself because that's what you're supposed to be doing. So don't bury the lead. Going back to that earlier advice, if you're an awesome person, which all of you are in your ways, make sure you talk about it. Don't make it just out to be, hey, yeah, you got to hire someone and I'm a warm body, so go ahead and hire me. You know, if you have to think about it from the perspective of the person reading it, what is it about this statement that would make me want to hire me? I think one of the biggest disservices that you have is that all throughout your experience so far, for many of you, as long as you've met the minimum criteria for something, you've been granted admission to it. You know, as long as you had the right grade point average, you got into that college. As long as you passed the proficiency test, you got moved on to the next grade. As long as you did this, this happened. Graduate school applications, job applications, that is the first time for some people that just meeting the minimum is not a guarantee. And I knew a lot of people, I remember when I was graduating from college, I jokingly said that it seemed like some of my friends expected that when they walked across that stage and they got their diploma, or they got their diploma holder, that there was going to be someone with it with a little note that said, here's your first job. Show up on Monday at this time and here's your job because, you know, that's what's going to happen. That doesn't happen. The other odd thing that I always find funny is when I talk to seniors who are graduating in May and I say, so what's your plan for after graduation? And they go, well, I think I'm going to get a job. I'm going to start applying for jobs in like June or July and hope to, have a job by August. It's like, but wait a minute. Why are you waiting till June or July? Well, it's summer. Yeah. After school, people work in the summer. You don't get a summer vacation. So while you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to take a couple weeks and enjoy that I'm done with school, and then I'm going to apply in June, July, the jobs are already gone. People have already been applying for them. I know people that set up jobs and have jobs waiting for them the day after graduation or before that. I've had students start jobs, during finals week, and they're juggling a lot with that. So when you are thinking about your future and you're thinking about what you want to do, if you don't advocate for yourself, if you don't say, I am the right person for this for these reasons, no one else is going to do it. So it is a personal statement. You do have to point those things out. You include real evidence and examples. Don't talk nebulously about, I've shown initiative in my classes, or I've done this or that. How did you do that? Is it that you actually presented on a topic? Did you actually do some research? Did you actually find something out? Did you actually work at a specific job? Have you had these certain responsibilities? Discuss your professional interests and goals. What do you want to do after the place that you go? And this is important for graduate programs. It's important for jobs. Entry-level positions or entry-level things like graduate school, in a sense, because you could think of graduate school, really you've been working on your career the entire time you've been an undergraduate student, but graduate school really is more like being a junior member of that group than versus being a student. The very first week I was in grad school, I remember being amazed by how much open time I had and thinking, what do I fill this with? Because I'm only taking 2 classes. That seems weird. And I'm a full-time grad student, so what else am I supposed to be doing? And I talked with my advisor, and he said, well, here's some data you could analyze, and here's some stuff you could do in the lab, and we have this project that no one has taken over. I thought, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm actually doing the work that my professor hasn't gotten around to. I'm doing that. That's not student, that is employee. So knowing that going in, I know that that's not my end goal. My end goal is eventually I'm going to transition to another job. I'm going to transition to another thing. So have that aware and be realistic about that. And some don'ts. Don't rely too heavily on spell check. Spell check is a good initial tool, but it's not infallible. Spell check is not your only check. Grammar check is not your only check. Having other people read it is part of your check. Don't submit a personal statement addressed to another school. That one seems so crazy, and yet it happens a lot. I see that in cover letters. The professor position that we were advertising for here, just within the last year, I saw that on cover letters. People just applying and saying, I am so excited to be applying to the assistant professor of psychology position at some other school university. Like, yep, well, that's great that you're excited about applying there because you're not going to get the job here. And I remember having a conversation with someone else on the committee, and their first question was, well, what did you think about so-and-so? I didn't read past the first level of the first words of their cover letter. Why not? Did you read their cover letter? And then they pull it, oh, yeah, we can't hire them. So don't make that mistake. And the funny thing is, it's an open secret. I mean, everyone knows that you're applying to multiple programs and multiple jobs and all of that. No one thinks that you're just going sequentially. Apply somewhere, see if you get it, wait, okay, I didn't get that, I'll go somewhere else. If that is actually what you're doing, don't do that. It's a bad idea. You should be applying to multiple places at the same time. Don't write your statement with the goal of telling schools what you want, what you think they want to hear. And the point is that you don't know what they want to hear. And assuming you know what a group of people you've never met wants to hear is a really dangerous thing to assume. You've not met these people. You only know what you think they want to hear. And in many cases, the things that graduate students have written in personal statements, I've looked at and went, I don't want a graduate student that says that. For example, appearing to know more than they do. I want someone who goes, hey, I want to get into this area because I think I can make a difference, and I know full well I'm not prepared to do that yet. I need the training that your program's going to offer me. I need the experience that your job's going to offer me. If you come to me and you say, I am a superstar that knows everything and I am so smart you would be an idiot not to hire me, I'm going to let you go somewhere else because I don't want to deal with that attitude. I want to deal with someone, the old saying about the more you know you don't know. I need someone who understands that. I don't want someone who's going to be so confident that they will not take any direction or any formation. Because I'm not hiring for someone who's a senior level person who I want their expertise. I'm hiring for someone who is willing to learn and willing to understand an area. So you don't know what they want, give them what you are. Don't use quotes or give a title to your statement. That just seems kind of pretentious. I mean, it's kind of fun. If you really have a quote that you love, I guess you can work it in there somewhere. But, you know, it's kind of cliche to have that. Don't use the statement to explain something negative. Okay, so I'll talk about reputation later in the semester, so I'm not going to ruin any stories for that. But suffice it to say, if you know there is something negative about you on the internet that could easily be Googled, you should be aware that you need to explain that somehow, but your personal statement's probably not the best place to do that. At the very least, you could make an abstract reference to, I've had, challenges in the past that I have overcome and can provide more information on, or something like that. That's a good way to communicate to someone that if you know this, I know you know it, and we can talk about it. I'm not trying to avoid it, but I also am not going to waste my time here on that. What you don't want is a situation where you've not mentioned it or have anything available on it at all, and a hiring committee is looking at you and going, something off about this person. I actually had that a couple years ago. It was right after COVID. This person had a gap of time on their resume. I thought they might have just been in private practice. I thought, there was some explanation for it. And then we had a Zoom interview, and this person was rambling on about something. So that's that last one. Don't ramble. Don't ramble in a personal statement. Don't ramble in an interview. But this person was rambling, and I was kind of bored. I was like, I haven't Googled them yet. I should probably do that. So I pull up Google. I put their name in. First page, or first result, was from FBI.gov, where the FBI had announced that this person had been convicted of insurance fraud. And I look at the dates, and I look at the resume, and I realize that gap of employment was when they were in federal prison. Like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense now. So as they're rambling, they're still talking about, these things. I'm thinking, well, how do I want to bring this up? Because this is an interesting thing. And so I said to them something along the lines of, I threw a question out that was, we really value at this organization honesty and transparency, and understand that people have all had various backgrounds and journeys. Is there anything in your background that has been a substantial challenge for you that, you could talk about, this sort of thing? Basically, it was, I know, buddy, you should say something about it in this scenario. And they just went right past it, didn't talk about it at all. I thought, okay, that's slick that you're, I'm literally communicating to you that I know that the first result for you is FBI.gov, and you're just going to power past it. They didn't get a call back. They didn't get a second interview. So if you do have something negative that you need to explain, there are ways to hand wave to it to let people know that you know that they know, but you don't want to go on the offense in your personal statement. Be like, I know that I've had trouble with the law in the past, and let me tell you all about that. Unless it really ties into your central points. I mean, maybe your central points are your redemption arc, which is okay if that's going to be it. But it shouldn't just be oh, by the way. Let's talk about this. So that is what I have for personal statements. We have some time left for questions and answers, comments. What can I help out before? Tomasz.
What should he have done in that situation?
The person who was convicted of insurance fraud? So this person was trying to have a redemption arc. They were trying to get back into the field after this whole situation. I would have expected to see something in their cover letter literally saying, I found myself in a situation years ago where I made decisions I was not proud of. I have decided that I want to, do my best to come back into this field and be a pillar of virtue in it and do better. But I will not deny that I had some personal challenges in the past. So it probably should have been front and center because it was so easy to find. That I'm mad I didn't find it until before the interview, but it did let me have a fun time in the interview knowing about it. But yeah, if you have something that major going on, it should be front and center and a part of your narrative and not just a, oh, by the way.
About when you're a little frustrated in group projects. I've mentioned that, and I was like, okay, I will. And so I went in and I wrote that down, but did it in like a more polite way because I don't want to bad way to put it, but I don't want to toot my own horn. So it was just kind of like, I've had my moments where we had inconsistencies, or we had moments of not understanding one another, but we persevered. It's like one of those where you want to bring it back to the central point.
Yes.
We did good things here.
Yeah.
It wasn't always good though. And I feel like that's human.
Yes.
You have to acknowledge that you weren't always the best.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I told you to put that in, because it adds it gives you concrete. So it's a personal example that you can talk at length about, a lot of details about. You're not trying to obscure it. It's not just, oh yeah, there's been good times and bad times. This was a specific bad time. This is a specific way we got through it. But it also sort of opens the door to have that conversation too and show growth. If you can show, personal statements are all about trying to show the growth that you want to have in this next step. But if you can show growth already in them, that's even an added bonus to show how you've adapted and fit into, adverse situations. Other questions, comments?